Honorable Minister, all other protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for the warm welcome. First, I must apologize on behalf of the representative of the Country Office of Jamaica, Mrs. Therese Serna Jones, who was supposed to be here today, but she was called away to a meeting in Washington unexpectedly. She has asked me to do this presentation, so I have the unenviable task of presenting somebody else's presentation. So we can save our questions. We'll send it by email to her. The IDB, of course, is very keen to be part of this event, and we wish to commend the Jamaica Productivity Center on hosting this National Awareness Week. Productivity, as you know, and it is so interconnected with growth. Without it, of course, we have no growth, and the IDB is particularly interested in this in Jamaica and elsewhere in the region. This presentation that I'll undertake this morning, we share with you what has happened in the region, then in Jamaica. We will also share with you some public policies and also what the IDB is doing. What prevails in Jamaica and the region? We have a widening productivity gap between the LAC, that is Latin America and the Caribbean, and developed countries. Growth is based on factor accumulation, not innovation. And you will see subsequently in the slides how bad we do on innovation. And of course, you know, yesterday was the 100th anniversary for Fort Assembly Line. For those of you who are following closely that. Many institutions addressing productive development, but less is known about their effectiveness. This is in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. There's weak institutional capacity throughout the region that leads to high transaction costs. And this is the red tape and the bureaucracy that the minister just spoke about. The time spent on government regulations, the days to obtain operating license, days to obtain import permits, construction permits, etc. We have wide variation among the countries for tax administration. You can see there Jamaica is leading second after Brazil. And of course, because of that, you have a high level of informality. And the informality in Jamaica, if you know, in 1991, it was just 11% of GDP. By 2000, it was 40% of GDP. The IDB is in the process of updating that informality study to see where it is. But I'll posit to say it's probably 60% now. There's a missing middle of productive MSEs. So what we have is a bunch of SMEs versus larger companies, but the MSCs are not very productive, so we don't see that export-led base SMEs. They're more focused on domestic market. This is in part caused, of course, by the high level of informality that we have in the sector. And it's a vicious cycle. Why we have the high level of informality? The tax is burdensome. Why would you want to be formalized in any event when as soon as you get registered, the government is after you? So the informal sector is known to have lower productivity. Invariably, you can't even measure it because that is not available. The informal sector, however, attracts very low-skilled persons. And when we come to the performance of the Jamaican economy, our school system, you will understand why this is more so prevalent in Jamaica. Access to credit is also an issue. And if you look at the you will see, if you look at the column, you will see we are all in the region competing in the hundreds, in 3 digits for that. Weak fiscal capacity, this is due to poor government revenue. Business climate is perceived to be challenging in Jamaica. I wouldn't speak too much on that because the minister already expounded on it. But over 30% of our businesses in the enterprise survey that was done in 2011, which is the last one, claimed that 7 out of 15 obstacles were major constraints. Of course, these are well known. It's tax rates, tax administration, corruption, crime, electricity, high cost of electricity, that is, practice of the informal sector. This is the high level of informality that we have, and access to finance. This is the our level of innovation and competitiveness in the region. When we compare ourselves to the others, to Singapore, for instance, that is at 8 and number 1 in institution and innovation, you can see why we're not performing that well. And now for the unemployment and the underemployment. Jamaica unemployment rate is 16.3% as of April 2013. Unemployment rate for youths aged 14 to 24 years is 38%. Important share of unemployment are microactivities. There is a huge sector, a huge segment of the population that are involved in this. And this comes back to the youths who are not working or not in school in the age group from 20 to 24. In the subsequent slide, you will see how terribly we're doing on this, unfortunately. The percentage of the cohort attaining 5 CXC, at least 5 CXC, CSEC, they call it now. In my time, it was CXC, including math and English, was only 15.5%. What that means? It means it's only 15.5% of that cohort could go to university. What happens to the others? We have TVET in Jamaica, which is supposed to attract that particular bunch so that they can have some remedial skill or some technical skill. However, only 35.5% of those persons who apply to Hard Trust NTA Level 1, who did the Level 1 exam, were able to pass it. So what happens now? We have the bunch, the kids who just came out from school, who did not get the 5 CXC, who could not pass the hard NTA, and what are they doing? They're the youths at risk. And they're more so, unfortunately, boys. The labor challenges continue. Of course, the ones who passed and who went on to do post-secondary education, we then lose them to migration. Specifically on the figure on productivity, and this is coming from the JPC's work in 2009. The output per worker declined, of course, at 1.3%, but while we are declining, our counterparts in the region has been increasing 1.5% from 1972. Total factor productivity also declined by 1.74%. This is Jamaica. The unit costs for wage, of course, increased, but the real wage decreased. This presentation, I should have prefaced my remarks that this is on a country's productivity. I chose not to look at firms' productivity, but I wish to state that business sector productivity is the responsibility of the business sector. It is not government. The government provides the macro framework to allow the businesses to operate. But I had to put in this slide because I wanted to share with you how our firms are doing. The Caribbean firms' performance, as you can see where Jamaica is, we're -7. Who is doing best? Trinidad, of course. And I don't want you to use this for our argument on the Trinis product here. Because, of course, you know, there are a whole lot of other factors that the Trinidadians enjoy that we don't have here. Of course, energy is a huge one. And I know my colleagues at the JMA would say, yes, this is precisely what we were talking about. Of course, there are other factors that makes a firm productive. It's not just energy. It's the way you organize your plants, the efficiency, using shift system, etc. But I thought it was very interesting to see this. And I can tell you, Guyana doesn't have energy like you. We also have expensive energy. But yet our firms are able to be more productive. It's just Jamaica, Suriname, and Antigua and Barbuda are under the line, the gradient. Now, GDP is the engine of growth for job creation, but productivity growth is the engine of growth, is the factor for GDP growth. So it's a vicious cycle we're looking at. We cannot have one without the other. What are the implications for low productivity? We've experienced it in Jamaica. We have a lower standard of living. We have a higher poverty rate. We have more persons under the poverty line. Our goods are uncompetitive compared to our trading partners. And our poverty ratio, of course, in 2010 was 17.6%. And I posit to say that this has increased based on our poverty ratio. Now, the summary of the macro factors affecting productivity in Jamaica. are numerous. I just went through them. This is just summarizing it. The micro factors, as I told you, which is at the firm level or the business sector level, will be the choice of incentives, the supervisory practices used, the use of shift system, training schemes, general working conditions and relationship, use of modern technology, management system, and organization of your plants. Now, what are the policy options for the government of Jamaica? By no means is this supposed to be comprehensive. By no means it's an IDB list that we're proposing. By no means it's saying that the government is not doing any of it. The government is undertaking a number of these policy options, but I just wish to state them here that we believe that these are important for Jamaica. The pursuit of an appropriate macroeconomic environment. The manufacturing sector has been at pains, I believe, to ensure that they have expounded this over and over, that the government needs to get this right. They need to have a low interest rate environment to enable manufacturing process to continue, manufacturing entity. And this is, of course, to help have keep a low rate of unemployment as is compatible with a stable inflation. Full employment means that there's no slack in the system or unused potential, and we do have unused potential in Jamaica. The diffusion of new technologies. Because of the smallness of our nation, Jamaican firms do not undertake research and development, but they can adopt best practices and new technology. I wish to share with you the National Research Council of Canada, I believe, is a best practice in doing it and getting this done. I believe we need to have a ramped up SRC here in Jamaica, because I know they do the similar thing, and I hope that gentleman there is not from SRC. So what happens is that because particularly SMEs are not able or doesn't have the resources, especially when they're paying 40% of their resources in energy costs, they don't have the time and the resources to undertake innovation, research and development activities. So what the Canadians did through the National Research Council is that they provide this service. So any SMEs can go there, whether they're in sugar manufacturing or tourism, a little hotel or whatever, they can go there and get these best practices that they can then implement. So all they had to do was to find the money to do it. And there were even grants offered by the agency to help with this. Subsidizing decline in industry, of course, is not in the productivity interests of Jamaicans. Of course, we all understand in this region, it's not just Jamaica, that sometimes we prominently prop them up for political reasons. Facilitate the movement, that was for the facilitated movement of resources from low productive parishes and industries to high productivity parish and industries. Now, I don't know, by the end of this, you guys will probably throw me out of Jamaica, because I can't see Jamaicans or the government taking people out of one parish because the parish is not doing well, for instance, in bauxite, and say, you know what, go to Kingston or go to Montego Bay because tourism is doing better. But these are options that other countries have considered, where they've provided the incentives so that people can move, skills can move from one particular area to another, so as to utilize and provide employment in those industries, in those so-called successful industries, rather than for people to still sit in the parish and claim that they can't find employment. Investment in education. Of course, after you've seen the figures I've just posted on education, you can understand why we need investment in education. But this was supposed to be investment in post-secondary education, because this is where you have the innovation. Of course, when I look around at the posters this morning, I was absolutely amazed that high school kids can produce such things. But investment in post-secondary education is critically important for Jamaica, because there were a number of spin-off, like Silicon Valley, for instance, came out of a university arm of research, as well as Research in Motion came out from Waterloo University. And these are the research arms of the university. So this would be our counterpart, UE, for instance. However, because we have a huge problem down from the primary, secondary level in Jamaica, we have to, I just didn't say investment in post-secondary education, but rather investment in education. We need to fix that. Now, unlike my colleagues, I didn't choose to send my child to the American school. I chose for her to go to a local school, because I'm a product of a local school, and I don't think I came out that bad. However, when she came home and told me that the little boy don't understand her, and him don't listen to her, I have to tell her it's not him, it's him. Furthermore, it's not him don't listen to her, it's he is not listening to her. So it's a process of me unlearning her. Why would we want to do that? Now, of course, that's a completely different discourse on your patois. I understand the importance of patois in the society. But when you have a 5-year-old and you have to start teaching them there the difference that you can speak that but do not write it, why not just invest in Spanish and teach them Spanish? That's separate. That is not the IDB. Improve the business climate. Of course, the minister has gone through this. I will not go through it. The investment climate in Jamaica needs to be improved. In 1976, Jamaica was actually a twin city for a city in Latin America called Guadalajara. Today, they're the best in doing business. Where is Jamaica? What have we achieved? Apart from me being born, we're still talking about improving our business climate. So we have to move much faster on our reforms. Greater access to financial services. We have to improve the institutional capacity. We have to improve secure transaction registry, and these are all things that the government is working on, that the minister also attributed to. Also, there is an SME policy, venture capital, money, mobile money. These are all policies that the government is already working on. Calibrate, oh, sorry, I think, oops. Calibrate fiscal policy for impact on productivity. Now, what does this mean? We have a huge tax reform being undertaken, supported by the IDB, the IMF, and everybody else who is in town. But we have to, the government needs to ensure that the impact is clearly assessed so that the SME sector, which is the largest chunk of business in Jamaica, not necessarily the large businesses, that they're not, or they're positively affected. Of course, we're not talking about incentives because we know we can't talk about incentives. But tax burden, of course, impede growth of firms and increase incentive for informal behavior, of course, and rent seeking and all of that. And of course, it pushes them into informality. The overall target development policies have to have the greatest impact on productivity. We have to improve the sectors with the greatest potential. We have to deploy productive development policies, business service, cluster program, labor training, export promotion, incentives for R&D and innovation. And of course, we need to target productive MSCs. We cannot prop up poor and weak, unproductive industries. Now, I would like to share with you something. The United States is considered a leading country in terms of technologies, but it does not enjoy the highest level of productivity defined on an output per hour basis. A number of European countries have taken that role. France in particular, I must share with you why they have the highest. And this is also wasn't something I put in the slide because I didn't want for anybody to say the IDB said. But they have reduced the number of working hours. So instead of working a 40-hour week, the French nationals work 35 hours. Now, of course, I'm seeing my private sector colleagues thinking, oh, those lazy-ass people, we never send them home 35 hours. Or the government saying, oh, we can't do that. However, you had happier employees, you had meetings, you had less time for useless meetings, so people were more productive on a per-hour basis. And that is why the European countries do better than even the US. Of course, now, the French did not implement that policy to improve productivity. They implemented that policy to increase employment. But that was a spin-off effect. That's something for the Jamaicans to think about. The government, in recognition of these challenges, have accessed IDB support for a number of areas to improve the business climate. And in 2005, the IDB did a private sector assessment, and from then we started with a competitiveness enhancement program. So what we did, we designed a three-part program, a policy-based loan, which tackled policy areas of tax reform, and Mr. Chairman made mention to the number of areas, tax reform, the Partnership for Transformation were all part of that. LAMP, declaring more areas as LAMP, so as to reduce the cost and time to get your title. Those were all part of that. The creation of the credit bureau legislation was also part of that. Also, we introduced then the dialogue on secure transaction registry. Today, we are able to support the government, and this grant was only signed last week for $653,000 US to implement the registry. Now, what would this do? The registry will actually facilitate MSCs in particular, because not so much large businesses, to be able to use movable assets, both tangible and intangible, so as to get loans. So if, for instance, you have your Prado in Kingston and you go to NCB and you use it to borrow a loan, you then can't go down to St. Elizabeth to some other company there and ask to use a Prado again on a loan. As soon as they put the Prado in, they will find the information. The chassis number comes up, there's a lien on it. What happens now? There's a manual system, so you can do that. So with the secure transaction registry, we were able to help people to be able to use their properties, their movable properties, so that, and with an electronic registry, which will be hosted by the company's registry office of Jamaica. Also, out of that program, will support insolvency legislation, which of course is something necessary for Jamaican businesses, is particularly your weak institutions or weak businesses that are about to, that needs reorganization. And that is on the improved business climate side. We also have a program supporting fiscal consolidation and tax reform. I wouldn't want to speak too much on that because we all know where the tax reform is right now in Jamaica. Human capital development, I think this is critical, and I just listed a few of these programs that we're supporting. Our portfolio is over 300 million with numerous programs. But these I thought were critical to the areas that I've raised. Human capital development. And we're supporting this to help with primary and secondary school education, providing approximately 6,000 spaces through construction and expansion of schools, curriculum development, training of teachers. We also have the PATH program. And the PATH program, while you may not be able to see the link with productivity, because people think that PATH people are just collecting money from the government, the PATH program has a step to work component, which is new. And that will enable the persons who have not been able to find jobs, who have not had the opportunity to get the qualifications required to find jobs, to be able to get jobs. On energy, of course, we know that the stifling effect of high energy costs in Jamaica. We're supporting through the DBJ Energy TC, which will enable SMEs in particular to use alternative energies. And this has been very successful because there are a lot of small hotel properties which have utilized this. So for instance, I don't know if you've gone to any where you go out on the patio and people have the tendency to go out on the patio and leave the door open, and then the energy is all being utilized and escape. But the tourists don't think that, listen, I need to conserve energy. So what this does, it implemented the system. As soon as the door is open, the AC comes off, which is, I think, fantastic. So they can go in and out, or they can leave the door open, which they invariably do, but the AC is off. So they know to get it on back, they need to close that door. SME. In addition to that, we have SME support with JAMPRO through the IIC. The IIC is one of the IDB arms, private sector arms. Excuse me. It supports SME access to export markets, help them with market studies, and to also provide technical assistance to the SMEs. And of course, we have our well, I think my presentation abandoned me. There. We have our hallmark program, Compete Caribbean, which is the largest technical assistance in the Caribbean to support competitiveness and private sector development issues in the region. This is a $40 million operation financed by our partners, DFID and CEDA. It's executed by the IDB, and the CDB is also helping by waiving their fees for the OECS countries to benefit. Jamaica has been the beneficiary. As a matter of fact, that secure transaction program that I just spoke about is financed by Compete Caribbean. These are the partners for the program. Now, conclusions. Jamaica needs some game-changing contributors to productivity to move from its low-growth trajectory to a more sustainable level, which is employment generating. We see the issues that we have with unemployment. We see the issues that we have with unskilled people. We see the issues we have with youths at risk. We see the issues we have with school leavers not attaining the required subjects to go on. Our reforms, of course, need to move much faster as a country, but firms also need to play their role. As I said earlier, the country's productivity and the firm's productivity are different persons responsible for it. The firm-level productivity and sector-level productivity are the businesses in Jamaica. The government would provide the macro framework to enable the macro productivity level to improve. Thank you.